Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvina Vadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we be nurtured together. May we be nourished together. May we strive together. May our learning shine. May we not quarrel. This means may both the student and the teacher, at least for the next 1.5 hours, attempt to do their best to focus on the task at hand. Parthaya pratibodhitam bhagavata narayanena swayam vyasena gratitam purana munina matye mahabharatam advaita amrita varshinim bhagavatim ashtadasha atyayinim ambatvam anusandadhami Bhagavad Gita bhavadveshinim. O Mother, Bhagavad Gita, I repeatedly meditate on you, who are the 18 chapters in the middle of the Mahabharata, composed by the ancient sage Vyasa, taught for the benefit of Partha by the Lord Narayana himself, the goddess, the shower of the nectar of Advaita, the enemy of rebirth. So this session will involve us being introduced into chapter 12. Now, before going into the verses, which is easy to do, we can just plow along the verses. I think it's useful to first put those verses that we're about to do in a structure. This way, the whole teaching will have some framework, which will make you comfortable and educated. And you get to see how these verses, how chapter 12 included, has context in reference to the whole 18 chapters. Okay, so let's go into structure. So this will involve some technical language. Let's talk about the chapters, first of all. Chapter 2 to 5 of the Gita, which consists of 18 chapters, talks about the individual, the jiva in Sanskrit, the individual psychology, the individual mind, the individual emotional system. So this means the person first, before going into the heavier and the higher teachings, first has to address their own inner psychology, has to look into themselves, has to resolve some extremes within their own psyche. So chapter 2 to 5, all of this education culminates in chapter 6. Chapter 6, the title was Dhyana Yoga. So this means this was about the practice of meditation. So this is whereby the jiva turns his or her mind inwards to acknowledge the very meditator. So this means once the jiva gets educated about who I am as a relative person, but also in my relationship to the absolute, only then you're now taking that knowledge into meditation. So you can see how lovely this Gita actually shows us that meditation is not something to jump into unless you're first jumping in with some solid foundation. Who is the person that's jumping into the meditation? I first have to know that. Otherwise, meditation becomes second guessing. We think, is this it? Is this it? So we just take these ideas and thoughts that come up in meditation and we start to attribute them with these Sanskrit terms. We start to live in these Sanskrit terms like, oh, that's Brahman, oh, that's Atma, and so on. Okay, now chapter 7 to 11 talks about Ishvara and Jagat. The word Jagat in Sanskrit means universe, also means world. When I say world, don't just limit it to this earth, but also world as in anything tangible, anything physical. Jagat also means both manifest and unmanifest. So chapter 7 to 11 talks about the nature of Ishvara and also the Jagat. Specifically, chapters 7 to 9 talks about how the universe came about, something that we all want to know eventually. Chapter 10 is whereby the Arjuna got to recognize the presence of Ishvara in individual forms. Some of the individual forms were like Ganga, the letter I in Devanagari. You got the sun, the moon, Brahma Vidya. These were some of the individual glories that were worthy of worship, as pointed out in chapter 10. Then in chapter 11, Arjuna got to recognize that the essence of all forms that were talked about in chapter 10, of all individual forms, is Ishvara. So this means it's one step higher. In chapter 10, the mind was only as good as in recognizing Ishvara in individual forms. And then once you're qualified to move on, then in chapter 11, okay, this Ishvara that I was worshiping in just Rama Krishna is actually the essence of this entire world, including this person, his thoughts and experiences. Just like chapter 2 to 5 culminates to chapter 6, in that same way, chapter 7 to 11 culminates into chapter 12. This is whereby the jiva, now recognizing who she is as a result of chapter 2 to 6, jiva goes into devotion to Ishvara. And Ishvara is learned where? In chapters 7 to 11. So this means the jiva, who now knows who she is, devotes to Ishvara. In other words, chapter 2 to 6, 7 to 11 are put together. So this chapter 12 is a result of going through chapter 2 all the way to 11. Now let's ask, what is Arjuna's condition so far? What is your and my condition having gone through these chapters? And by the way, if you haven't gone through these chapters, because often what happens is we go into individual chapters, there is no problem with that, by the way, because we often think I need to start from the beginning. That is not the case, because the teacher will reiterate the previous teachings. So it's not like you're missing out if you jump into chapter 12 or 13 or 16. In fact, in most cases, the Bhagavad Gita is taught as separate chapters. Okay, so what is Arjuna's condition so far? Having gone through chapter 2 to 11, one of the things we can say is he is filled with reverentiality for God. Now, we talked last week, you can only be devoted to something or someone if you have sufficient knowledge about what you're devoting to. So in that same way, Arjuna has sufficient knowledge. And this means he got or she got educated about Ishvara's orders. This is in the prior chapters, including what creation means, what sustenance means, and what destruction means. For example, before getting educated, destruction is usually associated to something that you want to stay away from. After going through the teaching, destruction, you have a different attitude towards it. You see that it's important, because without destruction, then how can you learn something new? Because learning is nothing but destroying the old. Arjuna also took a tour of Bhagavan's glories in chapter 10. We've seen that. So this means he increased, the reverentiality got increased as a result of witnessing these glories. And then the other part that Arjuna could be experiencing is he came to appreciate Bhagavan's cosmic vision in chapter 11. How? By Divya Chakshuhu. So as a result of these three possibilities, Arjuna's heart is now filled with devotion. Now, before you start to take this filled with devotion to a mystical, imaginary image, what it means, oh, devotion is like, oh, prostrating everywhere, he's peaceful and kind and smiley and huggy. Just bring it back down to earth. It just means I have more confidence, I have more knowledge in respect to what I am seeking. This means the person is more relaxed in life, not as frustrated or feeling lost anymore. So you always have to bring these statements down to earth. Now, let's talk about chapter 12 structure. Chapter 12 is a small chapter. Any smiles about that? It's a small chapter? Not so, because it's a thorough chapter, so there's a lot of discussion. and it's only got 20 verses. It gives the essence of the Vedas in reference to how they are to be used as a sadhana, as a practice. So this means, having now learned all of our knowledge and theory, how do we put this theory into practice? Chapter 12 can be divided into two sections. Verse 1 to 12 is the topic of Bhakti Yoga as a means to moksha. So this means 1 to 12 will remove confusion pertaining to the word Bhakti Yoga. What does it mean to say Bhakti Yoga? Verse 11 to 20 is the topic of, I'll ask you, once you have practiced Bhakti Yoga, what are you then going to ask? What is the benefit? What is the end result of this Bhakti Yoga? In other words, Bhakti Yoga Palam, in reference to moksha. In other words, what is that one who has successfully practiced Bhakti Yoga? What are they like? Let's get into their mind. What qualities do they share? In other words, what is a Jivan Muktaha or a Jnani like? Now, verse 1 to 12 overview. This is section 1. Bhakti Yoga. First, we will ask, what does Bhakti Yoga mean? Bhakti Yoga means aligning. When I say the word align, I'm talking about associating your thoughts, your decisions, and your actions to the presence of Ishwara's orders, like dharma and karma. So this means all of your thoughts, decisions, and actions are associated to the knowledge that this is indeed an order coordinated beautifully by Ishwara, by Ishwara's intelligent and material cause. This means you're always keeping Ishwara in mind. The other way to say what Bhakti Yoga means is it is keeping Ishwara in the foreground, in and through all events that happen in your life. Not in the background, but in the foreground. So Ishwara, God, becomes the main subject area in and through all of your thoughts and decisions. So Bhakti Yoga, what is it? It is not one specific sadhana. It is a name given to a series of spiritual sadhanas, and they all culminate to moksha. Specifically, Bhakti Yoga consists of 3 sadhanas. They are Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. Krishna then further refines these 3, which are the only ones that are mentioned in the Upanishads and the Vedas. There's no Raja Yoga, there's no Kundalini Yoga. This is it. Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga, Jnana Yoga. Everything else you've ever heard can be fit into one of these categories, which I will show you. Krishna refines these 3 into 5 further categories for the sake of specificity, as will be expounded in chapter 12. They are Karma Yoga, level 1, level 2. Upasana Yoga, level 1, level 2. And Jnana Yoga. So it's not like we're creating something new, we're just adding more specificity. Before I mention what they are, why am I saying this now? How is this relevant to you? Look at it this way. Whether you know about this or not, everything that you ever do in life in terms of growth and willingness to expand as a human being can be put into one of these sadhanas, into one of these categories. So all this is going to do is help you to see where you stand in relation to your progress. So this means we can talk about this or not, but it's better that we do, because then you can at least see where am I, and then from where should I then continue. If we don't know, then we can end up going backwards or forwards, not knowing where we stand. So Karma Yoga, level 1. This is called Sakama Bhakti. Sakama means with desire. With desire towards what? Artha and Kama. In general English, this just means money and entertainment. becomes the purpose of life. How big is the entertainment industry? Yeah, I think Netflix success is on the basis of entertainment industry. Entertainment is huge today. It's thriving. It's growing. All the mobile devices, the top grossing apps are all in the entertainment categories. So we can clearly see that these two categories dominate this world today. For these types, Dharma is not that important because Dharma has delayed results. When I say, by the way, Dharma, you're going to say, what does Dharma mean? In simple English, Dharma means self-growth. So whatever things you do to grow, that is called Dharma. So if you walk into a library now and you see the self-growth section, the self-help section, you can rename that called Dharma. So Dharma just means anything that helps me to expand. For these types who need level 1, for them, contributing is a foreign alien idea, except to close associates, of course. No one's got any problems contributing, giving to their own family. But in terms of contributing to the society without getting anything in return or no guarantee of receiving back, this is a foreign idea. The general statement will be, why should I give? They haven't done anything for me. This is very common to hear. So if a person thinks like this, they need Karma Yoga level 1 to get out of this small, selfish individual who only wants to give for themselves and their family. This is still containing the existence into one single bubble. Now, Krishna says these types who need Karma Yoga level 1, they shouldn't suppress the fulfillment of their artha and kama desires. There are some schools that say, you should put desires away because they are in sort of they're bad, right? They're not useful. So this is not what Vedanta says. We just say simply that desire comes inbuilt. We're just saying redirect your desire. So what Krishna is saying is redirect your desire. Otherwise, if you try to suppress it, then the mind is going to fantasize about its fulfillment, which is still not releasing or fixing the bigger issue. So what should they do? They should pursue worldly goals in respect to artha and kama. Artha and kama, by the way, also means community. Community just means life is about friendships and going to other people's houses and family and, lots of food around the table, and you just repeat that. So we're not saying anything's wrong with this, but this is just the priority, the basis of one's living. Krishna says pursuing worldly goals should be continued as long as two conditions are met in order for the person to qualify as a karma yogi level 1. Now you say, why should I qualify as a karma yogi level 1? Because level 1 takes you to level 2. Level 2 karma yoga takes you to upasana. Upasana takes you to jnana yoga. Jnana yoga takes you to the ultimate, the final reality. So this means two conditions should be fulfilled. One, the fulfillment of desires should be legitimate. They should be honest. What does this mean? This means that you should have no problems telling your mom what you do or someone that really matters to you. You're not going to say to someone, hey, I sell cocaine and or something like that, right? Because, it's sort of like, it's clearly wrong, right? So it should be openly honest and no one should have any objections to what you're doing. Why should it be honest and legitimate?
And you don't have any conflict all the time in your
Excellent.
mind.
Good. Okay, so Goknur said it beautifully. So to do something that I know is, if I get found, then it creates fear. And fear just adds unnecessary thoughts in the mind. It's always trying to hide things, and the self-confidence reduces, and it makes the person not so open in terms of learning, in terms of expanding, because they're too busy protecting that little secret. Condition 2 should be when you receive the results of your own actions. Tell me, when are you not receiving results of your own actions? You make tea, the tea that you're drinking, the whatever you put, lemon or honey, is that not a result? Yes, it is. So whatever results that you do, before enjoying them and before going, oh, I'm so proud of my skills, I'm so lucky to be alive. Before doing all of that, pause and first consider that they are gifts of God. This is called Ishvara Prasada. They are gifts because, what do you mean gifts of God? Because how many things were required for you to receive that? You needed arms to be working. You needed a healthy nervous system. You needed the companies to make the tea, and as someone to pick the lemons. And then the car needs to work in order to go to the shop and buy the lemons. You need to know what the word lemon means. You need to hold that in your memory. You need to have context, lemon in reference to tea and not reference to coffee. I don't know who puts lemon in coffee. So all these things need to work together to have this final result. Now you ask, what does this do? What kind of effect does this do or have upon the mind? What do you think? To always pause and consider this as an Ishvara Prasada, what effects could this have on the mind?
Provides a sense of complete surrender.
Good, surrender. Yep. Ajay, Robert?
Enhances devotion.
Enhances devotion. Good. Rani, Robert?
Yeah, it creates humility.
It creates humility. Excellent. Anything else?
We say gratitude, a mind of gratitude.
A mind of gratitude, yep. For example, suppose you buy a house or you rent a house. It doesn't matter whether you're buying or renting. Then how do we apply this attitude to our house? We can turn the house or the apartment into a temple whereby Lord resides. So this means most of our lives, or would say a significant portion of our lives, where do you spend your time? In your own house. I know it is much harder to apply this outside when you're standing on a train station and you're on the road, but in the house, we have a perfect opportunity to turn it into a place that you adore, that you love to be in, that you love to spend time in. You can put your own fragrances there, your own incense sticks, your own kind of pictures that matter to you. You can turn that truly into a temple that reminds you of the presence of Ishvara. And this is how the mind learns, by the way, through reminders. For example, I've got this lovely painting behind me, which was done by Rani. And, you know, to me, it means a lot because all of the symbolism there represents reverentiality. And this place is my office. This is where I spend most of my time. So whenever I walk in here, it carries this atmosphere of holiness, of sanctity. And that in itself keeps me always focused. And that always reminds me of this fact of reverentiality. This means just by being in the place, you are learning without actually learning anything because of the very reminders that you have set up. So this means one of the most powerful spiritual aids that you can do is right now, you can say, how can I turn my house, or if it's hard to do in your house, then just think about your own room where you spend your study time, your own private room. How can I turn into a place that I just love? I can't wait to get up and be in. You can put up special books, and you can rearrange your books, anything that is according to your representativity. Yes, Robert.
I just wanted to thank Rani because in looking at you on these talks, we look at that painting all the time. So we get the spiritual benefit of the work that she's put in. So I just want to say thank you.
Yeah. Fanny?
Thank you. Blessings.
So I hope you really got the idea. Please turn or attempt to turn your house into a learning environment just by having it remind you of divinity. Now, what's the result of level 1? It trains your mind, firstly, to acknowledge the presence of Bhagavan in everything. If not outside, then at least in your house. That is good enough because you spend half your life in your house. It also cultivates vairagyam. Vairagyam is necessary for further levels. This is this passion for things. This passion for things, please understand, does not mean distancing myself away or being cold. It just means I see the essential nature of that thing. So this means my maturity, my relationship changes on the basis of knowing that this ornament, as we spoke last week, is pervaded in and through by the same content that is the gold. It also cultivates your viveka. What does viveka mean? This means discernment. Discernment between the fact that all things are essentially fleeting in nature. Relax. You know, this is going to pass. So it makes things a little bit more bearable. Now, Viveka also can apply in terms of self-knowledge, but I just want to apply it now in level 1. Things are fleeting indeed. On the basis of that, I don't try to hold on to them. And by not holding on to things or wanting to make them mine, my relationship can be objective. If I don't apply Viveka, then the relationship becomes subjective. Then I start to grab, become needy, clingy, and nobody likes that kind of attitude. Level 2 of Karma Yoga. This is called Nishkama Bhakti. First one, Sakama. Second one, Nishkama. So this is without desire. Again, without desire towards what? What do we mean without desire? We mean desire has shifted from individual things in the world to something that represents divinity. So this means desire has not gone, it's just changed its priorities. Now in level 1, the definition of success was generally how much am I gaining? How much am I taking for myself? How much am I possessing? That definition in level 2 modifies, that means the success gets upgraded to how much am I contributing? How much am I giving back? So this means the word success in itself goes through a maturing process. Now, does this now mean the person goes into what's called selfless mode? Are we talking about going from selfish to selfless? No. Both of them are two sides of the extreme. Selfish means just take for myself, ignore the rest. Selfless means give to the other, appease the other, but ignore my own needs. So there are two sides of the extreme. We're talking about noble giving, nobility. What is nobility? It means I care for my own needs, but I also share to those who could use my services, who could use my help. So this means I am addressing both. I give my time and attention to the other, but at the same time, I do not ignore my own needs. This means I respect both sides and then work to make them in harmony. Now, in level 2, what happens? You develop alertness of others' needs. This means you become sensitive to others' wants. You become considerate for the environment. You become sensitive to the existence of others' being. For example, insects and birds and other human beings. All of these are beings, and you become more sensitive to their existence also. So what does this mean in real life? In level 1, it was generally my bubble. And anyone who's intrusive, who's threatening that bubble, I try to, take away. In level 2, before trying to take away, I first see, okay, how can I help you here? Because you're a human being also, and you also have needs and wants. So let's make something work together. This means you are willing to be considerate in level 2. And this takes time, energy, and effort on your part. Therefore, in level 2, the person gets attracted to activities where you can contribute your time, energy, and effort. Even if you weren't getting paid, you would still gladly do it. Social services where the individuals clean up the ocean, they clean up the beaches, they clean up the parks. All of this is coming from that sense of I want to give something. I want to be a part of something bigger. I want to go beyond my own taking. I want to give back. So this means this represents the maturing process within the person's mind. Only once level 1 and level 2 have successively gone through, once we've gone through those levels, then the person is ready for Upasana. So what is Upasana? This is the second sadhana. First of all, Upasana Yoga means a mind that's dwelling upon the object of meditation. This includes most of the, if not all, yoga practices that you heard before, including Raja Yoga, Kriya Yoga, Kundalini Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga. Why are they all included in Upasana? Because what I say about Upasana, it is mentally dwelling upon the object of meditation. And all of these practices in one way or the other involve me to meditate upon something using my mind. The question now is, why does Upasana come after Karma Yoga? Karma Yoga, both level 1 and 2, keeps the mind focused on what? The world, external objects. So this means, can such a mind that is focusing on external objects, can it find the time to go inwards and stay with itself in its own mind, look at its own thoughts, its own emotions? Likely not. So this means extrovertedness, which is still an issue in Karma Yoga, becomes an obstacle to concentration. And everyone needs concentration, focus, for the sake of inquiring into the nature of reality. Inquiring requires time. If you don't have enough time, the mind is not capable of focusing long enough. It is not going to extract depth out of its own questions. It will remain as good as skin deep shallowness. For example, suppose now I ask you, please give me some opinion about this picture. And I give you 2 seconds. Okay, what do you think? Now, in a sense, I was actually being unfair to you. Why? Because I didn't give you enough time. In fact, you can still answer me. You can say, well, but what are you going to say? You're going to probably say shallow, right? Shallow things like, well, it's red, you know, there's a face there, there's a ladder there, etc. But now, what if I say, give me a report, give me some feelings about this photo, about this painting, and take 1 minute and write a nice little report of it. And then I just wait. And then you're observing closely, you're thinking about it, all takes time. And then I say, what do you think about it? And I listen to you and I'm impressed. Why? Because I am listening to the depth which your mind was capable of assimilating as a result of the time that was given to it. So this means, and that required what? Concentration. So this means if I don't have that concentration power, that focus, then the person generally remains at surface level inquiry. Therefore, Upasana is required. Why? Because it helps the mind to expand the duration of its focus and concentration. Now, Upasana has 2 levels, as I spoke about. Level 1 Upasana is Eka Rupa Ishvara Dhyanam. Eka Rupa just means one form. So this means Ishvara Dhyana, meditation, becomes a form of meditating on one form. In chapter 12, Krishna will call level 1 Abhyasa Yoga. It means meditating on a personal version of divinity. For some people, a personal version is Jesus, Buddha, Rama, Krishna, could be even Ramana Maharishi, but whoever it is, for them, it represents divinity. It can also be samadhi. For some people, that represents the ultimate aim of life. It could be having a light in the third eye, the Ajna chakra, that also represents some form of discovery within oneself. As Thomas was saying earlier, yes, I've heard, indeed, that there is a Kriya Yoga practice that I know whereby you're supposed to see the light in the third Ajna chakra, and that represents, you're now seeing the Omkara, which represents the Lord. It could also be moving the prana up and down the spine. Also we have spiritual Qigong, where it's working with what's called Qi. It's equivalent to the word prana. Then there's plant medicines, that it can also be a representation of a personal deity. Now in Sanskrit, we also have a term called Vipashyana. Vipashyana, that's a long A at the end, means right knowledge. In Pali, Pali is a sub-derivative of Sanskrit that came after Sanskrit. This word is called Vipassana. So it's not Vipassana, it's not Vipasana, it's not Vipat, or whatever they say, right, in the Western world. It's Vipassana, long A at the end. So many mistranslations of this word. So all of these practices contribute where? Level 1. Why level 1, you ask? Because what's the purpose of level 1? Helps the mind to focus, to concentrate for a period of time. You will, from your own experience, know indeed that these practices are specifically meant to stay at one object at a time and dwell upon it with your mind. Once the mind, through level 1, has developed the extension of its concentration focus power, then it is ready for level 2 Upasana Yoga. What is level 2 called? Vishwa Rupa Ishvara Dhyanam. Just like in level 2 Karma Yoga, remember that the success definition changes? In that same way, in level 2 Upasana, the word meditation, that definition changes also. How does it change? It changes from sitting down with your eyes closed into an attitude perspective change towards the world. So this means the word meditation has now taken one step forward. It's no longer contained to one single place. It can now happen anywhere, because everywhere and everything is an expression of Bhagavan. Now this sounds, if you listen carefully, very close to Jnana Yoga, doesn't it? Level 2 and Jnana Yoga are very close, but they're actually not the same. Okay, so what's the difference between level 2? Considering level 2 involves recognizing the presence of Ishvara everywhere. Level 2 has been developed through your own viveka and vairagyam as a result of the prior levels. Whereas Jnana Yoga, you're getting knowledge, what you're actually devoting to. This means now you're having all of these doubts clarified. But in level 2 Upasana Yoga, there was still a lot of doubts. But amidst of those doubts, you were still capable of devoting to and recognizing the presence that all that is here is the one. Once the person has gone through these 4 levels, then the mind is decently qualified to enter the highest sadhana, which is Jnana Yoga. What is Jnana Yoga? It is the inquiry into the nature of reality, the inquiry into Brahman specifically. Jnana Yoga consists of 3 stages. Stage 1 is a systematic study of the Upanishadic scriptures. What does systematic study mean? What does systematic word mean? It means step by step. It is structured. It is not random teachings, like random Zen koans and random quotes from different schools and just sort of dump them into the student's mind. There's a structure in the teaching. And this structure deals with the topic of Brahman. The culmination of this study, which is Shravanam, is what? It is the removal of the beginningless notion that I am a small, separate individual being who doesn't know where he or she stands. So this notion starts to get removed. And in fact, it does get removed completely as a result of Shravanam. So, important to understand, Shravanam is not just study, but also the study transforms or transfers directly into helping the very studier recognize his or her relationship to the universe. So it's not just an object of meditation, object of knowledge, but it turns into a direct benefit. What else happens in Shravanam? The person sees, the student, the aspirant recognizes that from the standpoint of Brahman, there is no difference between Jiva and Ishvara. Both are limitless. When I say Jiva, I'm talking about you, the individual. The person, the student, also sees that from the standpoint of Ishvara, there is an apparent difference between the Jiva and Ishvara. The Jiva is clearly limited in knowledge and power, whereas Ishvara is limitless in knowledge and power. But more importantly, what does the Jiva have to do? They have to respect this apparent fact of limitation. So it's not just a matter of saying, oh, okay, there's this, there's this limitation between us and I can't accept that. No, the Jiva has to accept it, because just like the wave has to accept that it is indeed apparently limited, and if it doesn't accept it, then it's going to lead into a continued conflict. So this means I accept my apparent limitation as an individual, but it doesn't deny me from the knowledge that my true nature is Brahman. Stage 2 is Mananam. Mananam is correcting the intellectual doubts which are obstructing the knowledge having been taken place in Shravanam. So what does this mean? It means that I take the old doubts continue from other schools, from what you've heard before. all of these things start to infringe upon what we hear in Vedanta, and then we create conflicts and we cannot quite resolve it. So in stage 2 mananam, the person now uses their very sharp and keen viveka to resolve these contradictions. There is no question of whether the authority of scriptures are true or not. They are indeed authoritative. So the person doesn't say, you know, I wonder if maybe the scriptures got it wrong. No, the person by now says, it is my job, my duty to align my views, my perspective according to the Shastra. Now, level 3, stage 3 is nididhyasanam. What does this mean? It means managing emotional obstacles, managing psychological traumas from childhood. All of these deny oneself from the full benefit, the full enjoyment of the knowledge having taken place in Shravanam and the doubts being removed in Mananam. Don't think these childhood emotional holdbacks are going to magically disappear. They will indeed realistically continue to the last breath. But it doesn't mean the person is doomed, it's over. It means still that you need to work on the relative person in order to at least decrease their intensity, to decrease their load. So this means the person's job is to continue self-growth even after knowledge has fully taken place. So don't think now that a jnani is like so free, they just watch TV and they don't have to do anything. A jnani is much of a student of their own mind as is any other sincere seeker. They are cleaning their mind day in and day out. And one of the most universal gauges that nididhyasanam is working is cheerfulness. You just find yourself more cheerful in life for no particular reason, just more uplift, upbeat, more smiley, less chance to be, sort of go into these states of sadness or confusion. So just generally positive and upbeat in life. This is a result of nididhyasanam. Now, what's the conclusion so far? All these 3 sadhanas, which are karma yoga, upasana yoga, jnana yoga, equals bhakti yoga. So now, if I ask you, which one are you into? Are you into bhakti yoga or jnana yoga? What are you going to answer?
So like,
yeah, okay. You're going to say, Andre, you got the question wrong, right? Because jnana yoga is bhakti yoga. So in other words, why am I asking this? We hear this word bhakti yoga a lot. And by the way, the word bhakti yoga is nowhere mentioned in the Upanishads nor the Vedas. This is a specific term used for chapter 12 of the Bhagavad Gita. So before we speak bhakti yoga, the questioner has to first know what does bhakti yoga mean in the first place. What does bhakti yoga mean? Karma yoga, upasana yoga, jnana yoga. So if you're into any one of these, you are performing bhakti yoga. Finally, overview of verse 13 to 20. Krishna here lists out the qualities of a perfected person, of a perfected yogi, a perfected jiva, you might say. And this jiva who is perfected, who has successfully undergone through these 5 sadhanas or 3 sadhanas from standpoint of the Vedas, is called a jivan muktaha or a jnani. And Krishna says, such a devotee is dearest to me because there's no distance between me and him. I am one with him and he or she is one with me. Having gone through this technical introduction, we're now ready for verse 1. Well done for staying alive. I was just listening to the Bee Gees song the other day, staying alive, staying alive. Arjuna uvacha evam satata yuktaye bhaktas paryupasate ye chapyaksharam avyaktam tesham ke yoga vittamaha.
in this manner, there are those devotees who, abidingly committed, meditate upon you, and also there are those who seek you as one who is not subject to decline and not available for objectification. Who among them are the greatest knowers of yoga?
Can you continue, please?
After seeing the Vishwarupa, Arjuna asked this question based upon what he saw. This question proves that the vision did not solve his problem. He still maintained a division. Here, Arjuna wants to know who is superior, a karma yogi who is doing upasana or a jnani. The karma yogi is doing meditation upon the Vishwarupa. The sannyasi is contemplating on Akshara Parabrahma. One pursues Saguna Brahma and the other Nirguna Brahma. Which is better? The question has certain implications. It is not who is the more exalted among the two, but rather who is closer to moksha.
Okay, that's enough. Good. Any thoughts so far?
Another great question from Arjuna.
Yeah, indeed. Robert, something to conclude?
Yeah, look, isn't it true that the jnana yogi is closer to moksha? Is that not the case?
Okay, good. So this is the whole discussion, actually, who is closer to moksha, and Krishna is not going to answer according to what Arjuna wants to hear, and we will soon find out why. So it's exactly what Arjuna is saying, and you want to know, like, give me an answer, give me a straight answer. It's not that simple. Okay, so here Arjuna is asking which bhakta is superior. Nirguna bhakta. What is a nirguna bhakta? One in pursuit of self-knowledge, jnana yoga. Swami Dayananda will call, by the way, nirguna bhakta a sannyasi. You just heard that word. I'm not going to use the word sannyasi. I will call him a nirguna bhakta. Why? Because I'm going to compare nirguna bhakta and saguna bhakta. That way it's very easy to identify. So what are some of the qualities of a nirguna bhakta? Or what is the mind of a nirguna bhakta doing? What's going on in such a mind who is called a nirguna bhakta? This mind is owning up. We're not going to say owned up. We're just going to say owning up, in the process of owning up to the fact that the attributeless reality, which we call nirguna Brahman, is the very subject I. So the mind is owning up to that fact. Now I said the word attributeless. Now what do you mean attributeless? How can reality be attributeless? And how can an attributeless reality function? So just a simple metaphor. I'll ask you a question. What does your tongue taste like? $1 million for the answer.
Well, I think whatever we eat,
Now, what about a tongue by itself?
it takes its flavor.
Yeah, so the tongue is indeed. Yeah, so the tongue
question, the tongue does the tasting, so you can't ask what does the tongue taste like.
Yeah.
It's doing the work of it.
Exactly. So the tongue, by its nature, is in this language attributeless. It doesn't have a taste of its own. And because that is so, only because of that is so, it's able to taste everything else. It's able to make out sweetness, bitterness, saltiness, etc. So it doesn't now mean that the tongue is dead, it's attributeless. But in the presence of the no tasting tongue, the attributeless tongue, all of the other tastes have their glory. And then you go, tiramisu or whatever other cake you enjoy. So in that same way, this attributeless reality, because it is attributeless, one can identify the various tastes of life, which we call my life. That's all your life is, just various tastes going in and out every single day. And all of that gets validated beautifully and clearly by this one attributeless reality called Nirguna Brahman. Then the second comparison is Saguna Bhakta. So remember, Arjuna's question is, which of these is superior? Nirguna Bhakta? Now, Saguna Bhakta. What does this mean? It means the one who is a karma yogi level 1 and 2, and Upasana Yogi level 1 and 2. Now you know why I said these preliminary introductions. What does this mind do of a Saguna Bhakta? It meditates on Ishvara with attributes, with qualities. So this means the first type meditates on an attributeless reality. The second type meditates on Ishvara with attributes, with qualities. The general understanding for a Saguna Bhakta is that the fact that the entire universe is consisting of beings, objects, and experiences. You can surely testify this through your own experience. That's what the whole universe is. Objects, things, and experiences. And they are all testimonies of Bhagavan's existence. And because that is true, the person thus meditates on various attributes of the universe, because they're all testimonies of Bhagavan's existence. For example, what are some examples? The person can identify Ishvara's intelligent and material cause in different sciences. So if you're in biology, you're looking at that lovely cell under a microscope, then you can invoke that as a reminder of this intelligent and material cause. They also listen to Bhagavan's glories. This is the approach of the Puranas. You can also use service to divinity. This is a karma yoga approach. Now, Arjuna is indirectly asking which is the best way of worshiping Ishvara. Very straightforward question. What's the best way of worshiping Ishvara? In other words, which path brings one more effectively and efficiently to moksha? That's what he's indirectly asking. Now, what does the word effectively mean? It means the way which has less chance of failing. And what does efficiently mean? The way that involves less steps. So what Arjuna is asking is which way is less likely to fail, effective, and which way has less steps, efficient to attain moksha? Fair question. So before we answer that, I want to ask you, what do you think is making Arjuna ask this question?
Because he himself wants to achieve it as soon as possible.
Indeed, yeah, okay. What else could be making Arjuna ask this question? What would have to go in such a person's mind to ask, what is the fastest and the best way to attain the highest goal?
Greed? I don't know.
I mean, it's kind of like you want to improve yourself. Sure, you can call it self-greed, but in a positive light.
Is he making the same mistake when he asked, is karma yoga or jnana yoga better? And he's saying that he thinks there are options.
Yeah, okay.
But there are no options.
Yeah, okay, good. Good you picked that up. I'm going to get there soon.
I think Arjuna feels it's a war that he's going to. He's going to be killing some people that he loves. And so he wants to get to moksha, even though he thinks it's going to be a bad deed doing what he's doing.
Okay, good. Good.
Or is it more an excuse, or is it more Arjuna is making an excuse for himself?
That could be a possibility. We cannot rule that out also.
He has great desire to achieve moksha, and he wants to make sure he achieves it in the shortest period of time with the least effort.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. Okay, so my take is on the question, why is Arjuna asking this, is if you look around, you will see there are actually many paths out there. Every one of them seems legit. And everyone who's practicing them will gladly, enthusiastically promote it. Like, this is the best path that you should follow. And when you listen to this, you say, well, I mean, you got a good point. The person is genuine. Their life is happy. They're having results in life. And you go, but everyone else is actually saying the same thing. So which path should I go for? Considering they all seem perfectly legit, practiced by authentic people. For example, some people say that God is attributeless, but then they say, yeah, but he has got divine attributes. God is formless, but he's got divine attributes like he's compassionate and he is loving. And you say, that makes sense, God is loving and compassionate, he's benevolent. And then in Vedanta, we say God has no attributes. And you say, well, okay, that also makes sense, because if God was love, then there would be no such thing as, you couldn't have hate, because God would be just love. So you kind of like build these contradictions through the course of time. And you say, hey, just, hey, wait a minute. I'm busy, man. I've got a short life here. Which path is going to be the fastest, the safest, that involves the least amount of confusion and hassle? Having asked this question, what does now Arjuna do? He describes those who practice Saguna Bhakti. Who are those who practice Saguna Bhakti? And he uses the word satata yuktaha. That's aha, that's a plural there. So devotees who regularly practice or who regularly meditate upon Saguna Ishvara. So who is a Saguna Bhakta? The one who regularly meditates upon Ishvara with attributes. How? With steadfastness and dedication. So what does the word steadfastness mean? You tell me.
Without giving breaks or something.
Okay, without pausing for too long.
Yeah.
Constant focus and concentration.
What else with steadfast?
Determined.
Determined, yeah. So these are all qualities of strength. This means focusing on one thing and refusing to be distracted by other advertisements that are trying to get our attention away. And this meditation Saguna Bhakti consists of two types. First is Karma Yoga, as I described in the introduction. What is Karma Yoga? Karma Yoga means any dharmic activity. What kind of activity? It has to be infused with Dharma. What is Dharma? A quality, a value which addresses the concerns of others also. This means it addresses the concerns of the total. This means it embodies the full picture. So any dharmic activity that is performed, but it is also acknowledging the presence of Ishvara, that is Karma Yoga. You cannot call it Karma Yoga if it's only dharmic activity. It has to also be associated to Bhagavan's presence. So this means you can do two things. No change in action. One way is to perform it from the standpoint of Dharma. Okay, I'm doing this, like I'm contributing to the world. I'm cleaning the beach right now. And that is Dharma. That is going to have some punya benefits, no doubt. But if you introduce one more aspect, that's going to double or triple or quadruple your punya benefits. And that is to say that this beach, I'm doing this for what? For God alone, because all that is here is the Lord. And that's instantly going to explode the amount of punya that you're gaining for your own mind. And the second is Upasana. So this Saguna Bhakti, Karma Yoga one, and the second is Upasana. What does Upasana mean? Mental activity that involves contemplating upon the presence of Ishvara. The word Upasana is also synonymous with the word Dhyanam. So whenever I say Dhyanam, I'm talking about Upasana. Then Arjuna describes a Nirguna Bhakta. He says, Aksharam Avyaktam. What does this mean? Nirguna Brahman. That cannot be objectified through the sense organs nor through the mind. This doesn't, by the way, mean that the Brahman cannot be known by the mind. It just means that Brahman cannot be turned into a time-bound object within the mind. Now I'm feeling Brahman. And now I'm hungry. I'm no longer feeling it. So this is not what we're talking about, because that's called putting a thought of some divinity into a mind and then going, okay, on the basis of its presence in my mind, I call it now this name called Brahman. It cannot be objectified, even though the mind is required to know Brahman. So the question now is then, how can we meditate? How does one meditate upon a formless principle? Because we said Brahman is the attributeless reality, the formless principle. How then do you meditate upon a formless principle when you cannot turn it into an object of meditation that begins and ends? What do you think? Or how does meditation take place? The acknowledgement of the attributeless reality when it cannot be turned into a time-bound object in the mind. Yes.
Into silence, quiet the mind.
Okay, I mean, a quiet mind is going to still entertain the presence of silence. The mind is now quiet.
Understand what you are not.
Okay, that's still going to turn Brahman into negation. So we're not really focusing on Brahman, we're focusing on the thoughts of negation in order to arrive to Brahman. Madhu?
I would say when you've realized that everything that you see around is Bhagwan itself. So you, all the time, when you've offered all your actions to Bhagwan and you're doing everything for that, with that purpose in mind, you're always there with Bhagwan then.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so Madhu has beautifully described it. So what she's saying is, the question was, how does one meditate upon a formless reality which cannot be put inside the mind, that has a duration to it? The answer is by owning up to the fact that Brahman is the very subject I, because of which all experiences of the mind and the activity of the mind are validated. Okay, now my mind's going through silence. How do you know it's silent? Because the very subject is Brahman. So the summary of verse 1 is question, who of these two is superior? Nirguna Bhakta or Saguna Bhakta? And then in verse 2, Krishna is obviously going to now answer this question. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Maya Vesha Mano Ye Mam Nitya Yukta Upasate Shraddhaya Paryopetaha Te Me Yukta Tamamataha.
Sri Bhagavan said, endowed with unflinching faith, their minds committed to me, being ever united with me, those who meditate upon me, considered by me as the most exalted.
First of all, what is the basis of Arjuna's question? Because he asked, who of these two is superior? The basis of his question comes from incomplete knowledge. As Thomas was saying earlier on, I told him that I was going to bring this up. And this incomplete knowledge produces a faulty question. So this means if my knowledge of a subject matter is not full, then the person will innocently ask questions that don't make sense. What is an example of incomplete knowledge? Suppose you say Ishvara is only with form and qualities. That's called incomplete knowledge. Suppose you say Ishvara is only, the true Ishvara is only the one that is formless, attributeless. That is also incomplete knowledge. Why?
These are just stages that one must go through. I mean, you have to first maybe look at Ishvara as with attributes, and only then you can move on to Ishvara without attributes.
Excellent, Kritika. So Kritika reminded us that this is, again, not black or white. We cannot say it's like this or it's like that. In fact, both are true. Because if you say that Ishvara is only with form or qualities, then you have to account consciousness. Because it's clear consciousness is not a form, it's not a quality. And if you say that Ishvara is without qualities, without formless, then how do you account the world? Because the world is nothing but form. So this means we have to understand that, or we could say that who is the best kind of bhakta? The one who sees no contradiction in the coexistence of both. If I see a contradiction, then I need something to work on. So this means that the best kind of devotee is one whose mind is most often absorbed in the final reality. What do I mean by this? Suppose you say, if you think that Ishvara is only formless, then is your mind going to be absorbed in Ishvara when you're thinking about form? No. So this means that that mind is only half the time absorbed in reality. You can also go the other way. Suppose that Ishvara is only with form, and then you spend most of your life just devoting to forms. Now, what happens when you're not devoting to forms and just sort of relaxing and not thinking about anything? Is your mind absorbed in Ishvara? No. It's only absorbed, therefore, when I'm devoting to forms, or the other extreme, it's only absorbed when I'm meditating on my concept of the formless. So this means the one whose mind is absorbed most often is what we can call the best kind of devotee. And for this to happen, you have to understand what reality is. And what is reality? It does not exclude the fact that it's formless. It also doesn't exclude the fact that it's with form. I need to see how they're both coexisting without creating any contradictions. In other words, Dvaitam does not contradict Advaitam. Furniture does not contradict the wood, because wherever there is furniture, that's exactly where wood is. Krishna is going to answer. However, the question was faulty. So obviously Krishna doesn't want to insult Arjuna's intelligence. He doesn't want to say, you know, you got a wrong question, man. You need to ask the question again. So how does Krishna handle this? Like, because you don't want to insult your student, right? Your student's paying attention. You don't want to bring him down. The only way is by not answering directly, because when you compare two things, remember the question can only be related to something that is similar. You cannot ask a question to something that is dissimilar. For example, if I ask you, do you want coffee or tea? Fair question. But what if I say to you, do you want coffee or cup? Can't ask that, because they're different categories. So this means that in reference, bringing this example in reference to Nirguna Bhakti and Saguna Bhakti, which was the question asked in verse 1, one of them is a means, the other is the end. And you cannot equate means and end. You need the means in order to come to the end. So it's like asking, which one is better, the means or the end? So Krishna answers anyway. What does he say? He says, Saguna Bhaktas, Arjuna, are superior, while Nirguna Bhaktas attain me. Why do you think he would answer like this? It's a smart way to answer, by the way, without insulting your student.
Because you start with Saguna Bhakta.
Yeah.
It's a step-by-step process, right?
Good, okay. So the fact that you're asking this question means what? My mind still needs work. So I might as well tell you or answer your question according to what you need. Saguna Bhaktas are thus superior. In other words, since I'm asking the faulty question, you might as well just tell me that Saguna Bhaktas are superior, because that's going to make me what? Engage in Saguna Bhakti, so that I can come to Nirguna Bhakti. How does Krishna say this specifically? He says, Mayi aveshya manaha ye mam nitya yuktaha upasate. He says, some practice meditation upon me. The question is now, how do these some who practice, how do they meditate? He says, Nitya Yuktaha. They meditate ever steadfast and committed. Now I asked the question, what does it mean to say steadfast and committed? And you gave me some, good answers, but I'll give you a story. There's a story of the gopis from Vrindavan. Vrindavan is a place where Krishna spent his childhood. It's in the Uttar Pradesh district in northern India. And the gopis, they're like fine girls, fine young women. They loved young Krishna because Krishna was young there, and so they spent time together. They sang for him, they danced for him, they waited for him, they made butter for him. They couldn't wait to see him every single morning. In other words, they lived for Krishna. They lived for the Lord alone. They were steadfast. One day after Krishna left, because he outgrew the place, he had to move on, Shri Uddhava came to Vrindavan, and he noticed the gopis' tears. They were in pain from the separation, anxiety of being away from Krishna, from the Lord. So what did Sri Uddhava say? He says, why don't you forget him and worship someone else? He left you all heartlessly. And what did the gopis say? They said, we would if we could. Unfortunately, we all have one mind that has been stolen by Krishna. With what then shall we worship someone else with? Think about this. In other words, their mind was completely placed in Krishna. This is called steadfastness. To the point where even for 1 second, when their hearts and minds was away from this steadfastness, their tears were seen. They were in pain. Then Krishna continues, and he says, they are endowed with upetaha paraya shraddhaya. They have full faith in the scriptures, in the Guru, and in Ishvara. So before answering this, I'll ask you, what is faith?
Total belief without any doubt.
Doubtless trust.
As in, it doesn't fall within the boundaries.
Total
No.
acceptance and surrender.
Yeah, surrender, good. Okay. What is partial faith? Because what is faith? Faith in the scriptures, the Guru, and Ishvara. Okay, sounds easy, right? Well, let's see how easy it is. I'll ask, what is partial faith? For example, some say that Lord is omniscient. What does omniscient mean? All knowledge. And yet the person finds themselves telling God his or her pain. I'm in pain. Don't you see? Wait a minute. He's omniscient. He already knows. Why are you telling him? Yeah, smiles. So caught you. Some say Lord is omnipotent. That means what? There's nothing that can limit his power. And yet we say, I wonder if he can give me moksha. I wonder if he can help my life, improve my life. What does that mean? He doesn't have all power. Partial faith. Some say Lord is omnipresent, all-pervading, and yet they look for him elsewhere, in meditation, in samadhi, in the temple. What about in oneself? So these are all examples, subtle examples where the faith is actually partial. And yet we speak about, yeah, I've got faith, no issues. And in your very behavior, you're showing that faith still needs some development. In fact, that's why Jesus said, oh yeah, man of little faith. Having spoken what is partial faith, then we ask, what is full faith? So there's a nice story where once upon a time, there was a man who used to worship Ganesha every day. And one year he was having trouble in his family. So he needed some help. He needed to alleviate the situation because it was causing suffering some pressure. So he prayed to Ganesha for days, and his problem still persisted. It wasn't alleviated at all. In anger, what did he do? He put the Ganesha on the upper shelf of the altar, and he replaced it with Shiva, because if Ganesha cannot remove my obstacles, then Shiva is definitely going to destroy these obstacles. However, at the same time, he noticed, because Ganesha is now on the top, the incense smoke from the bottom was entering the trunk of the Ganesha. And in anger, noticing this, he closed the nostrils with cotton, because he said, no, I'm not going to let the smoke enter into the Lord. And that's when the Lord appeared and said, for the first time, you have shown that your faith is not just as good as seeing this as a pure stone, but you, for the first time, have shown that this is a living, breathing God. In other words, we look at this statue and go, okay, well, this is just a stone and I'm putting it up. But imagine the kind of faith that you have, that you identify this completely as a living, breathing God. Because what did we say last time? Where is Ishvara not? Where is intelligent and material cause not? Nowhere. It is everywhere. In other words, this man fully understood that. And that is called having full faith. So now, why do you need strong faith? The answer is because saguna dhyanam, that means meditating on Ishvara with attributes, which is meant to extend your concentration and purify your mind, has delayed results. Expansion of the mind, sensitivity, capturing realities, self-growth, sharpness of the mind, all of this takes time to develop. This is not an overnight process. It takes years. And it's also subtle. So not only is it hard to identify, because some of us say, I've been doing this for years, I don't see much improvement, but also it takes time. That is why you need a lot of faith to not be tempted by the fact of quitting, especially when the results are subtle and when they are delayed. And next week, we will talk about verse 3 and 4, which are long verses, which specifically deal with what is Brahman. Let's talk about the nature of Brahman and your relationship to Brahman. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May we all be happy. May all be free from illness. May all behold good things, and may no one suffer.